The wind outside was wild. It pushed against the walls of the small metal house, howling like a ghost in pain. Inside, Caleb sat by the heater with a hot drink in his hand. He was alone, as always, just him, his tools, and the cold silence of the outer colony. No one ever came this far. His place was at the edge of the settlement, forgotten by most. He liked it that way. No noise, no trouble, no people. But then knock, knock, knock. He froze. 3 soft knocks, not loud, not angry. More like a whisper than a threat. Caleb looked at the door. It was past midnight. Who would be out in this storm? He stood slowly, picking up the small blaster from his table. His boots crunched on the metal floor as he walked to the door. Another knock, even softer this time. Whoever it was. They weren't trying to break in. They were begging. Caleb opened the door just enough to look through and saw her, a young alien girl, soaked from the storm. Her thin cloak stuck to her skin. She was shaking badly, lips blue from the cold. And her large eyes looked down, not up. She didn't say, "Help me." She didn't cry or scream. She just whispered in a soft voice, "I can cook. I can clean. I can be quiet." Caleb's heart skipped a beat. He looked closer. Her wrists were red, and around one was a broken metal cuff. She had no shoes, just rags around her feet. She wasn't dangerous. She was desperate. He looked at the storm behind her, then at her again. If he said no, she would freeze before morning. He sighed, lowered his blaster, and opened the door wide. "Get in," he said. Not unkindly, she stepped in. Slow and careful, like an animal afraid of a trap. Water dripped from her clothes onto the floor. She didn't look up once, just stood near the heater. Trying to stop her teeth from shaking, Caleb shut the door, locked it, and turned back too. "Her sit," he said, pointing to the floor mat near the heater. She obeyed without a word, sitting cross-legged with her back straight. Hands on her knees, like she had been trained. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. He grabbed a towel and tossed it to her. "Dry yourself." She caught it and nodded quickly, then began rubbing her arms and hair, still not speaking. Caleb walked into the kitchen corner and poured her a cup of warm broth. He handed it to her. She looked at it like it was treasure. But before drinking, she asked quietly, "How much does it cost?" That hit him hard. He frowned. "Nothing. It's just food." She blinked, confused, then slowly took a sip. She closed her eyes as the warmth spread through her body. Her shoulders dropped slightly, relaxing for the first time. Then she whispered, "Again, thank you, Master." Caleb nearly dropped his cup. "Don't call me that," he said sharply. She looked up quickly, eyes wide, thinking she made a mistake. I'm sorry. I'll do better," she said in a panic. "Stop," he said, holding up a hand. "You're not a slave here." She froze, like she didn't understand the words. "Not a slave." "No," he said firmly. "You're safe now." She looked down again, holding the cup tightly with both hands. Silent tears began to run down her cheeks. But she didn't make a sound. She just kept drinking. Caleb sat across from her, watching. She was young, maybe 20 in human years. Her skin was pale purple, with light blue markings under her eyes, hair black and long, tied with a piece of wire. She had the look of someone who had suffered far too much. He didn't ask her name. Not yet. She didn't seem ready for that. Instead, he simply asked, "Are you hungry?" She nodded, still not looking at him. "I have more broth," he said, standing up again. "And some bread, too." She whispered something he barely heard. "I'll work. I'll earn it. Just don't send me back." Caleb stopped, hand on the pot. Send her back. Back where? He didn't know who she was or where she had come from. But he knew one thing: someone had hurt her. And whoever they were, they might come looking. But tonight, he wouldn't think about that. Tonight, she would sleep under a roof, with food in her belly and warmth on her skin. And for the first time in years, Caleb didn't feel quite so alone. Asterisk, she didn't sleep at first. Even though her body was tired and her eyes were heavy, she sat in the corner of the room, back against the wall, knees pulled to her chest, like she was still in a cage, even after Caleb rolled out a soft blanket and offered her a real bed. She whispered, "I sleep better on the floor." Caleb didn't argue. He just left the blanket with her, turned off the light, and went to his own room. But he didn't sleep either, not fully. His mind kept returning to the way she looked at the heater like it was a miracle, to the way she flinched every time he moved too fast. And to those words, "Just don't send me back." By morning, the storm had passed. Sunlight fell through the cracked window, painting long lines on the floor. Caleb walked out of his room and found her in the kitchen, wearing one of his old shirts, a size too big. She was washing dishes that weren't even dirty. Her movements were quiet, soft, and exact like someone trying hard to stay invisible. "You don't have to do that," he said. Rubbing his face, she froze, turned her head slowly, and lowered her eyes. "Sorry," she whispered. "I thought I should be useful." Caleb walked over, took the towel from her hands gently, and set it down. "You're not a servant," he said. "This is my home, not a work camp." She looked confused again. "I don't understand," Yoshi said honestly. "Why let me stay, if I don't do anything for you?" Caleb didn't answer right away. He poured 2 cups of water and handed her one. Then he finally said, "Because no one should have to earn kindness." She stared at him, silent, then, slowly, she sat at the table, holding the cup in both hands again like it was made of gold. Caleb looked at her closely. She had small bruises on her arms, some fresh, some old, a thin scar near her neck, barely hidden by her long hair, and on her wrist, a faded barcode, whatever life she had escaped from. It wasn't just bad debt, was designed to break her. "What's your name?" Caleb asked softly. She looked up, her voice barely there. "Ilari, that your real name?" she said quietly. "It's the one I gave myself when I ran." He nodded. "Then I'll call you Elri for the first time." She met his eyes directly, and just for a second, there was something behind them. Not fear, not shame, but hope. She helped him with breakfast, though Caleb noticed she moved with extreme care, always waiting for approval. Every action was followed by a quick glance at him, checking his face, like she expected punishment when she cracked an egg too hard and it spilled. She gasped and backed away. "I'm sorry, I ruined it. I'm sorry," she cried, backing toward the wall. Caleb raised both hands in calm. "It's just an egg," he said gently. "Relax, Ilari. No one's angry here." She stared at him like he was speaking another language, then slowly returned to the counter. Still trembling, by afternoon, she had cleaned the entire cabin, top to bottom, even the parts Caleb had ignored for months. When he asked why, she just smiled a little and said, "I like feeling useful." She didn't ask for credits, or praise, or rest. She just worked until her hands were sore. And when she sat down near the heater again that evening, she whispered, "I used to dream of a place with warmth." Caleb didn't know what to say, so he handed her a plate of food, sat beside her, and just said, "You're here now." She blinked quickly, fighting tears. Then she did something he hadn't seen before. She laughed, a small, soft laugh, like the sound of wind through chimes, and Caleb realized something. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was beginning to live. But even as the moment warmed the room, Caleb's eyes drifted to the broken cuff she had left by the door, and to the tiny blinking light on its edge. He picked it up, heart tightening. It was transmitting a low signal, hidden, quiet, but steady. Someone was tracking her, and now they might know where she is. The collar looked harmless at first, just a broken piece of rusted metal, left near the door like old trash. But Caleb had seen enough tech in his life to know nothing designed to track someone is ever harmless. He sat at his workbench, flipping the piece over in his hand. Tiny wires ran along the inner ring. And under the grime was something worse, a hidden chip still faintly blinking red. It wasn't sending a wide beacon, but it was still sending, low frequency, encrypted, steady. He set it down slowly. Ilari was humming quietly as she folded clean towels behind him. She had changed since that first night just a little. She still jumped at loud sounds, but her eyes didn't carry the same weight. She moved lighter, spoke more often, even smiled sometimes. And now? This collar, it could destroy all of that, Ilari, he said, without turning. Can you come here a moment? She walked over quickly, drying her hands on her shirt. Yes. He held up the collar. This was still active. Her face turned pale. She took a step back like he was holding a weapon. I didn't know, she said quickly, voice shaking. I didn't know it'd still work. Ty thought it broke when I ran. Please don't. I'm not angry, Caleb interrupted. Calmly, I just need to know, Ilari, who is tracking you? She looked down, her hands gripping her own sleeves. My owner, she said softly. The one who bought me. That word, no, were stabbed into Caleb's gut. You were sold. She nodded. On the outer black market rings. We were just called utility species, not people. Her voice was hollow, like she'd told this story to herself 100 times. I was raised in a breeding farm, trained in housework, obedience, and silence. They taught us that silence made us safe. Caleb clenched his fists slowly. He had heard rumors of such things in the farther systems, but never this real, never this close. And now she was here, in his home, after escaping something worse than death, she whispered, when I ran. I thought I was free, but I didn't know the collar had a chip inside. Caleb took a breath, then turned toward his tools. I can disable it, he said, but first, I want to scan its data. Ilari looked scared, but nodded. If they're coming, she said, you should know who they are. Caleb connected the chip to his scanner. The screen flashed with code lines of slave registry logs, punishment history, owner ID, even auction dates. It was sickening. But then, something odd. A warning flashed across the screen. Property of Syndicate Vortex. Alert. Tampering detected. Caleb cursed under his breath. Vortex. He said aloud, that wasn't just some backstreet trader. That was one of the largest private slavery networks operating behind legal fronts in half the galaxy. They had money, muscle, and eyes in almost every port. And now they knew he had her. Ilar sank to the floor slowly, pulling her knees to her chest. I've brought danger here, she said quietly. You should turn me in. They give rewards. Caleb looked at her in disbelief. Do you think I care about rewards? You're not something, Ilari, he said firmly. You're a person and I don't sell people. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for a long time. She didn't say a word. Then, barely a whisper. Why are you like this? Caleb gave a weak smile. I don't know, he said. But I'm not letting you go back. He disabled the tracker manually, burning out the chip with a short power burst. The screen showed signal lost, but he knew it might be too late if the signal had reached them before he fried it. They'd be coming, not with laws, but with guns. Ilari, he said, turning serious, if they come. Will they do to you? She didn't blink. They'll kill you, she said. Then take me back, then punish me in ways you don't want to hear. He nodded slowly. Then we'll stop them. Her voice trembled. How? Caleb stood, walked to the closet, and pulled out two things, an old pulse rifle and a dusty combat vest. By being human, he said, loading the rifle, and by reminding them what that really means. Outside, the wind began to pick up again. Not from weather, from the distant sound of ships descending. Asterisk, it had been 3 days since Caleb disabled the tracker. 3 days of silence, watching the sky, checking the scanners, and waiting for the syndicate to show up. but nothing came. No bounty hunters, no merc ships, no coded threats. Just quiet wind and the soft sound of Ilari sweeping the floor for the 5th time that day. Caleb should have felt relief, but instead, the stillness made him more nervous. Why weren't they here yet? What were they waiting for? That evening, the power flickered. Just once, then again. The lights dimmed, then came back stronger. Caleb tapped the old fuse box and frowned. Generators. Aging, he mumbled. Ilari was sitting by the window, her arms wrapped around her knees. She stared at the stars through the dirty glass like she didn't believe they were real. "They're beautiful," she whispered. Caleb turned, surprised. That was the first time she spoke without being asked. "You've never seen them before?" She nodded, her voice soft from inside cages. The stars were just little holes in the ceiling. Caleb felt something shift in his chest. That kind of sentence didn't deserve to exist. He sat beside her, not too close, just enough to share the view. "They're real," he said. "And they're free." She turned her head slightly. Eyes on him now. "What does it feel like?" she asked. "To be free your whole life." He thought for a moment, then shrugged. "Lonely," he said, honestly. Until now, Ilari blinked slowly, her lips parting slightly in surprise. Then she looked back at the stars, her voice like wind. "No one's ever said something like that to me before." They sat in silence for a while. The stars shimmered above, and for the first time, Caleb noticed something new about her. She wasn't just quiet now. She was calm. He stood up, moved to the small speaker unit he rarely used. It was old, full of dust, but still worked. He turned it on, and soft music began to play. A slow, human tangential notes, like rainfall on glass. Ilari tilted her head. "What is that?" "Music," he said. "You don't know it." She shook her head. "Noise wasn't allowed where I came from. Only silence or screams." Caleb turned the volume down to a whisper. "This one's different," he said. "It won't hurt you." She listened quietly. At first, her face was blank, watching, waiting, unsure. Then something happened, something small. Her lips curved. Just a little. It was barely there, like she didn't even know it was happening. A smile. Caleb stopped breathing for a second. It was the gentlest thing he had ever seen, like a flower blooming in winter. A moment that shouldn't exist, but somehow did. Ilari blinked, then noticed his eyes on her. The smile disappeared in an instant. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, her face turning red. "I didn't mean no." Caleb said, walking over. "Don't be sorry. Ever." She looked at him, unsure what to say, so he said it for her. "You smiled." She touched her lips like she didn't believe it. "I don't remember the last time I did." "You should do it more," he said. "It suits you." She looked down, and this time, she smiled again on purpose. A little bigger, a little braver, but the soft moment was cut short. The security monitor on the wall began to blink. Red light. Motion detected. East side perimeter. Something was out there. Someone. Caleb stood immediately, his face shifting from soft to sharp. He moved to the screen and tapped the feed. Grainy footage showed a shadow near the fence, tall, armored, moving. Slow. Ilari stood up too. Back stiff. "Is it them?" "Could be," Caleb said, grabbing the rifle from behind the door. "Stay low." But Ilari walked toward him instead. She didn't hide, didn't back away. "I want to help," she said. Firmly. "You sure?" He asked. "I've been hiding my whole life," she said. "I won't hide now." He handed her a smaller sidearm. "Then stay close." The stars still shone above. But the peace was gone. The night was no longer about music or smiles. Now it was about survival, and this time they would face it together. The alert stopped blinking, but the silence it left behind was worse. Outside the fence, something had moved. Someone had come, and now, nothing. No more footsteps, no more shadows, Just stillness so deep, it felt like the world was holding its breath. Caleb didn't like it. He stared at the screen, watching the camera feed as it looped again. Elari stood beside him, the sidearm firm in her grip, her hands no longer trembling. "They're not here to talk," she said quietly. "No one from the syndicate ever is." Caleb nodded. He moved to the reinforced window and peeked outside. Snowflakes drifted lazily, covering the footprints that had led to the gate. Whoever had come knew how to vanish fast. That meant they were professionals. He tapped the screen again, scanning the outer perimeter one last time. A message popped up on the monitor. "Bounty alert, target identified. Lao Wen credits alive. 5,000 dead." A photo of Elari appeared right beneath it. She wasn't just a missing asset anymore. She was a price tag. Elari turned away from the screen, her face blank. "I'm not even worth much," she said, voice dry. "Dead, I'm just scraps." "Don't say that," Caleb said firmly. She looked up at him slowly. "Then what am I?" She whispered, "Because the only thing I've ever been is someone else's property." Caleb didn't answer with words. He simply walked over, reached out, and gently placed his hand over hers. "Here, you're not a thing," he said. "You're a person, Elari, and I don't care what they say. Your worth, your life, is priceless to me." Her eyes welled with something she hadn't let fall in years' tears. But before she could speak, the power cut, everything went black. The generator had failed. Or worse, someone had shut it down. Caleb moved fast, grabbing glow rods from the cabinet and handing one to Elari. "Stay with me," he said, loading the rifle. "If they're here, they'll use the dark." They moved through the cabin quietly, lights low, weapons ready. Each step felt like a heartbeat, and then bang. The back door exploded inward, metal slamming off its hinges. Smoke flooded the hall, and heavy boots thudded in. Shadows in armor. Faceless, silent, syndicate bounty squad. Caleb fired once, then again. One of them dropped, but the others kept moving. Ellery ducked behind the workbench, pulled the trigger of her weapon, and missed. But she didn't freeze. She reloaded fast and tried again, this time hitting one in the leg. They screamed and fell. Caleb shouted, "Go for the hallway. Get to the tunnel." They had a hidden passage under the cabin, an old maintenance shaft that led into the rocks. Elari hesitated. "What about you?" "I'll cover you, go." She ran, but not to escape. Instead, she sprinted to the panel near the generator room and slammed the emergency lock. Then she threw herself into the hallway and disappeared into the tunnel. Caleb stood his ground. Heart pounding, he fired again, clipping another attacker, but there were too many. Then, just as one aimed straight at him, boom. A blast echoed through the floor, shaking the cabin, the tunnel. Elari had rigged it with explosives. A dust cloud poured back into the room as the remaining mercs stopped, confused. Off balance, Caleb used the moment, tackled one, disarmed another, and finally silence. Only his breathing remained, fast and heavy. Then he heard Elari's footsteps coming back up from the tunnel edge. She was covered in dirt, coughing but smiling. I got two of them," she said, stunned at her own words. Caleb stared at her. "You could have escaped," he said. "You didn't have to come back." She looked at him and said something that broke through the fear. "I didn't want freedom." Without you, they stood in the wreckage of the only home Caleb had known. Smoke and silence around them. But in that moment, something stronger rose, not just survival, but trust. And for the first time, Caleb realized this wasn't just about saving her anymore. It was about saving each other. The first shot of dawn was not the sun. It was gunfire, short, sharp, echoing across the frozen valley. Caleb jolted awake, grabbed his rifle, and rolled out of bed. The cabin walls were still damaged from last night's fight. And now they were back. Elari was already at the window, eyes locked on the movement beyond the trees. They brought more, she said, voice steady at least. 6. Maybe 8. Caleb looked at the scanner, blinking red again. Multiple life forms. Armed. Closing in, he ran to the kitchen and pulled up the secret hatch under the floor. Inside were the last of his defense, drones old, dusty, but still functional. I didn't want to use these, he muttered. But if they want a war, we'll give them one. Ilari followed him down into the small supply tunnel beneath the house. The wind above howled again, shaking loose snow from the ceiling. She grabbed a box of ammo, handed it to him, and asked, "Are we making a last stand?" Caleb looked at her, surprised by how calm she sounded. "No," he said. "We're making our first stand." He handed her a vest and set of goggles. "You sure you want to fight?" he asked, even though he already knew the answer. Ellery loaded her weapon, locked the bolt, and said, "I spent my whole life being silent. Now I want the galaxy to hear me." They climbed out of the tunnel, shoulder to shoulder. Snow crunched beneath their boots. And up ahead, just beyond the edge of the ridge, Caleb saw the first figure. Tall, armored in black, with syndicate emblems, holding a plasma cannon. "Drones, engage," Caleb ordered. The defense bots shot into the air with a loud hum. There. Red lights blinking like angry stars. The first syndicate soldier fired. Boom. The blast missed, but it melted part of the cabin wall. Caleb fired back, hitting the enemy in the shoulder, sending them down into the snow. Then chaos exploded. Lasers lit up the valley. Smoke rose from the frost, and the scent of scorched metal filled the air. Ilari moved like someone who had trained in secret her entire life. She hit 2 targets clean, using cover and speed. Caleb backed her up, reprogramming the drone mid-fight to block the side entrance. Another merc tried to flank them from the hill, but Ilari spotted him first. She slid across the ice, fired 3 times, and took him down before he could fire once. Caleb stared at her, stunned. "You're not the same girl I found in the snow," he said, breathless. Ilari wiped sweat from her brow and said, "You didn't find me. I found myself. The moment you opened that door, more enemies came." 2 rushed the gate. Caleb hit one. Ilari hit the other. But then a sound that made them both freeze. A deep mechanical rumble echoed from behind the tree line. A syndicate assault mech. 10 feet tall, walking on metal legs, and armed with twin cannons. Ilari's voice dropped. "We can't stop." Yes, Caleb said. "We can." He ran back inside, threw open his old equipment case, and pulled out a large silver device. "What is that?" She asked. "EMP launcher." He replied, "Only got 1 shot." Ilari nodded. "I'll buy you time." "No." Caleb said quickly, "We do this together." The mech appeared over the ridge, glowing eyes scanning for heat. They ducked behind the outer wall, hearts racing, breaths short. Caleb looked at her one last time. "You ready?" She nodded. For freedom, he popped up first. Taking fire and drawing the mech's attention, the cannons charged, but before it could fire thwomp, the EMP round soared through the sky and exploded in a pulse of blue light. The mech froze. Mid-step, powered down with a hiss. Its lights went dark, its legs locked. And then it collapsed into the snow with a crash that shook the earth. Silence, then cheering, not from them, but from nearby settlements, watching the drone feed Caleb had activated before the fight. He had broadcasted the Syndicate's attack. And the whole outer ring saw it happen live. People now knew the truth. Ilari dropped her weapon. Breathing hard, she turned to Caleb and whispered, "They'll come again." He nodded, and next time, he said, "They'll find a soldier waiting, not a slave." Ilari gave a weak smile, then walked to the center of the snow-covered yard. She raised her face to the rising sun and whispered, "I'm finally warm." For the first time in her life, Ilari slept without fear. No nightmares, no sudden waking, No cold floors or silent punishments. Just the soft blanket Caleb gave her weeks ago, and the quiet hum of a home that felt real. The sun outside was gentle. Not blazing like the syndicate's torches, not hidden like the prison moons. Just warm, peaceful, honest. She opened her eyes slowly, and for the first time, she didn't check her wrists. Didn't reach for her collar, didn't whisper a promise. To be good or stay quiet, she just breathed. Down the hall. She heard movement too, as clinking, soft music playing. And Caleb's usual mumbling when a bolt rolled under the table. She smiled and followed the sound. Still, in her oversized shirt and bare feet, Caleb looked up from his workbench, surprised but happy. "Morning," he said. "You slept through a full storm." "I dreamed," she said softly, sitting on the stool beside him. "I think." "I never did before." He smiled at her. "You were safe." A long silence passed between them, but it wasn't awkward. It was quiet. In the way she had once begged to be, but now it felt different. Not fearful, not small, just peaceful. "I want to change something," she said suddenly. Caleb raised an eyebrow. "Change what?" She held up her wrist to the place where the barcode once was. "I want a mark." "That I choose," he nodded slowly. "A name," he asked. "A symbol." She thought for a moment, then smiled. "My name is still Ilari," she said, "because I picked it, but I want a new word too. Something that means I'm no longer a number." He handed her a small piece of metal and his engraving tool. "Then write it." She leaned over and carved slowly, carefully, each stroke her own. When she finished, she held it up to show him. It was shaky, but clear. Alive. Caleb looked at it, then at her. And without needing to say anything, he nodded. "You are." Later that afternoon, as they repaired the damaged wall together, a notification blinked across the outer monitor. But this time it wasn't red. It was green. Syndicate Vortex leadership captured. Outer colony networks broken. Slavery rings collapsing. Caleb stared in disbelief. "How?" Ilari walked over, reading the screen. Then she smiled. "You sent out the broadcast." She reminded him. Others saw. Some of them finally fought back. She leaned her head against his shoulder for the first time. "They believed people like me were worth saving." Caleb looked at her. "You were always worth it." That night, they lit a small fire outside the cabin. Not for heat, just for light. The stars above sparkled like a million silent witnesses. And Ilari reached out, pointing at one. "That one's mine," she said. "Back when I was locked away, I used to stare at that one through the cell window. I promised myself, if I ever escape tide, name it, what will you call it?" Caleb asked. She thought for a moment, then whispered, "Freedom." They sat together in the snow. No longer prisoners of the past, no longer afraid of what might come next. Ilari no longer whispered the same old words. "I can cook. I can clean. I can be quiet." No. Now she whispered something new, something stronger. "I can fight. I can feel. I can live." And Caleb, who once lived alone with only tools and silence, looked at her and knew he hadn't saved her. She had saved him too. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were human and free together.